And that's the key thing with conservation is if you have these isolated fragmented patches, you're never going to be successful at truly conserving long term
Right.
to have networks.
Well, that's something I learned working with the Audubon Society. Something that they talked a lot about in Mississippi when I was there is that habitat sanctuaries and parks and all this are good and important, but if they're not connected, then ultimately the end result is not going to be good. It's sort of like just biding time,
That's exactly right.
and it's why they try to connect with communities a lot. So, getting sidetracked from your Alaska trip for a second, what is the strategy for conservation like here in the United States where everything is accessible? And just for example, something that got a lot of attention this year were the poppy fields in California and how publicized they got on Instagram, and so many people started
Right.
coming to
Yeah.
these fields, going off trail,
Yep.
carving out new trails. You can see over the course of just this past year all of these new trails that have been made from people that did not stick to the primary trails. So, from your perspective, what's the strategy forward to protecting these ecosystems and the biodiversity that we have in these places, given the limitations that we have, that a lot of these places in the United States are not these islands that are inaccessible to people?
Well, there's a couple of strategies with conservation I think work. Um, so often we fall on the idea of educating our way out of the problem. I
Yeah.
think it goes well beyond that. I think first off, before you institute any sort of conservation action on the ground, you have to get people to care. And I don't think that you do that through strictly education, but I do think you do that through exposure. And so you have to strike this fine balance between getting people to appreciate what's out there and exposing them to it, but doing it in a way where it's somewhat, I don't want to say structured, where it's somewhat, where they have the ethical boundaries around it to know that,
Mm.
okay, if I do this, it's having this effect. So that, because a lot of people just don't know. If
Right.
they're going to the poppy fields or if they're going on the tundra, which we saw a lot of in Alaska, walking their dogs and stuff, they may not even know they're having a problem. So first you have to establish that context of like, I'm a part of this whole thing and doing X causes an impact. So getting people there first is important. And one of the things I think is important to get people there is to engage with habitat locally. So we've talked about like native plants in your backyard and exploring your local parks and kind of creating that sense of place and that sense
Hmm.
of care about just your own stuff before you go out and explore further. I think that that's really important. But as far as actually implementing conservation that's going to address those concerns of overuse and everything, is thought out design. A lot of places just put up trails wherever they allow access to whatever this waterfall, this cave, this thing, and that's great because people see it, but then it degrades it, and over time you have a situation where people are experiencing a kind of uh, you know a, a replica of what once was there, and that's
Right.
a problem. That's a big problem. So part of it is instituting, to summarize, part of it's like instituting this appreciation in people through, I guess, like modeling and really taking the time so that they understand what their impact is, and then two, just thought out design so that if people don't know, they can go to a place, see the beauty, appreciate it, and build that, care without destroying it. Because so many places today are being loved to death. There's just not that much
Yeah.
nature out there. And what is there, people are increasingly interested in, which is great, but they're loving it to death.